I'll set my timer up.
Dealing with internet shutdowns, so maybe should be a discussion about how should we react on this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, also
Yeah.
technical measures and maybe
Or legal and regulatory
or
advocacy.
public anyway.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's,
Well, I guess we should start, right? Maybe should we shut the door or leave it open? We leave it open. Thank you so much for coming back from lunch, and it's a great day one, so we should get started on perhaps one of the most pressing questions in Asia Pacific. I'm Gayatri Kandarai. I'm the Asia Policy Coordinator at the Association for Progressive Communications. Two of our panelists couldn't make it physically, but we have them remotely joining us, and we also have Alexander. This session is going to revolve around what are the different kinds of internet shutdowns we are seeing, what do we mean by internet shutdowns. Perhaps we might even try to look at what is not traditionally seen as internet shutdowns, but what it means to be shut out of the internet in that sense. So what we will do is in the first round, we will try and get introductions from the panelists. We're joined by Raman in India, Joanne from India, and we have Alexander here from Russia. We'll start with a round of introductions where each one of them introduce their work and who they are, where they're from. But what I'd also like to get from the panelists is their sense of what is your understanding is network shutdowns, and what are the different ways in which you see internet shutdowns being imposed around the globe. Joanne, would you be okay to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's good to join you remotely. My name is Joanne, and I'm Associate Counsel at a digital rights advocacy group in India called the Internet Freedom Foundation. IFF has been working with internet shutdowns for a while now, when we began with our Keep Us Online campaign back in 2017. The internet shutdowns in India have been, we've been seeing reasons for it, which kind of cross the spectrum. We've seen general reasons like the security purposes, or if there are government officials that are visiting a particular area. But we've also seen reasons such as suspension of services for example, an exam that's been given to prevent cheating. So they've been so varied that at this point, anything could be a reason enough to warrant an internet shutdown or suspension of just access to the internet so far.
Thanks, Joanne. And could you also perhaps tell us what are the different ways in which it's done? Is it kill switches? What mechanisms do they use?
As far as I know, there's it's usually just a complete shutdown, as a kill switch, I suppose, would be something that they would do.
All right. So thank you, Joanne. Alexander, would you like to go next and introduce yourself, and perhaps add to the list that Joanne put out in terms of what is the basis and how is it done?
Okay, my name is Alexander Isavnin. I work in Russian Internet Protection Society. So our main task is just bringing awareness of what's going on with Russian internet regulation, how it negatively impacts Russian internet. Hopefully we do not have many shutdowns yet in Russia, but for years we already have a full-scale censorship system implemented, which is actually not shut down in not a shutdown for global internet, but it's definitely shut down for some resources which government doesn't like. And now we have fresh sovereign internet regulations, which actually could be a funny kill switch and could lead to shutdowns, well, in standard understanding what is it. So I hope we will be more or less successful in providing information to broader audience, and maybe legislation or a law practice will be changed in Russia.
Thank you, Alexander. Raman, would you like to add to that list and perhaps even justifications? But please introduce yourself.
Will do. Thanks so much, Gayatri. So my name is Ramanpreet Singh Cheema. I'm Policy Director and Senior International Counsel with Access Now. That the digital rights use human rights. One of the bits that Access Now also does is we actually help anchor the coalition that works against internet shutdowns globally, that tracks and works against them, the Keep It On Coalition. And the Keep It On Coalition's definition of internet shutdowns builds a lot of what you've just heard from the previous two speakers, but I think it's useful to look at the definition a bit. So, in fact, there are two definitions that we use. One is a slightly more human, generally understandable version, and the other one is a more technical one. And the more general definition is that an internet shutdown is when somebody, normally government, intentionally disrupts internet or mobile apps to control what people say or do. And as Joanne mentioned, they're often called kill switches and other actions as well. The more technical expert definition is that an internet shutdown is an intentional disruption of internet or electronic communications, rendering them inaccessible or effectively unusable for a specific population or within a location, often to exert control over the flow of information. You can see this definition online on the Keep It On Coalition website, which is accessible through the Access Now main site. But as you can see, the different forms there, and I'll build on to what Anne mentioned, sometimes it's a complete blackout or disruption of the internet as a whole, or sometimes a particular app or service, although there's a little bit of debate about whether that's always a shutdown. It can be blocking, and as Alexander mentioned. But the other activity that people are often noticing is also the slowing down of the internet, sometimes intentionally, in a particular area, often in order to disrupt access to services. So, for example, you switch mobile internet in an area from 4G to 2G, just because you know that doesn't work with many modern web services and apps. Another thing that I mentioned that we often see in this part of the world, and this is related to another fact, the largest number of internet shutdowns in the world in a region tends to be Africa and the Asia Pacific region. And the number one country for shutdowns, unfortunately, belongs to the honor of my home country, India. A lot of these internet shutdowns are often mobile internet shutdowns. So fixed line internet may be allowed to continue, but because the majority of the population accesses the internet through mobile phones, particularly 4G and 3G networks, government authorities shut down access to mobile internet. So that's the sort of like different things we see in internet shutdowns. And I'll end with a separate thing. I just wanted to thank Gayatri and others for helping organize this panel there, because I was supposed to be there in person. So I'm very grateful for her and for EPR IGF Secretariat members stepping in to help organize this while we joined remotely.
Thanks, Rahman. It's a pleasure indeed to help Access with their work on network shutdowns in any case. So what we've heard sort of in the first round is that there's kill switches, which is essentially the government ordering telecommunications operators to disrupt internet. But we also have instances where particular apps are blocked, and then there's also the examples like what we had in Bangladesh recently, where the internet is dropped to a particular, to a really low level, where you really can't use it in any sensible way in any case. But we also have other examples where there's jamming, that area-wise jamming that happens, right? When you're passing through a particular territory alone, where the networks are physically brought down. So Joanne, can we go back to you and try to build on on this fact that Raman just mentioned, right? That India is the leading country, whether it likes to call itself the largest democracy or not. It's certainly the largest internet shutdown implementer in that sense. So, what is it? What's the rationale behind it? Is this sort of a national phenomena, or is it restricted to the states? How are they going about it, and how come? And what is the pushback?
Well, India has had the largest number of shutdowns, especially in 2018. We've seen about, I think, 121 instances during the period of January to November. And it isn't as much as a national phenomenon. We've seen it particularly in a few states, which is most understandably Jammu and Kashmir. We've seen it in UP, in Maharashtra, Bihar, West Bengal, and a few other states like Haryana and Rajasthan. It's not spread over the country, but these are the ones that have seen it the most. 2018 was particularly interesting that way because initially the legal basis for shutdowns in India was largely based on Section 144 of India's Criminal Procedural Code, which gave the district magistrates the power to be able to conduct these shutdowns in case of what they thought was a nuisance or danger. But in 2017, there were these rules that were introduced, which were the temporary suspension rules, which was issued by the central government, and it furthered there was a lot of it furthered internet shutdowns because there were now two rules that could be used for internet shutdowns in addition to what was already existing. So what was the issue with it was that there's no transparency in how it's being conducted. There's no you do not know the reasons as to why it's being done. Sometimes there have been RTI requests that civil society organizations, including IFF, that have sought reasoning as to why internet shutdowns have occurred in certain areas, which have been largely to no avail. There have been a very few instances where you've got responses, and they've largely been for security purposes. Recently, in 2019, that is, an organization called the Software of SFLC, the Software Freedom Law Center, is one that's keeping track of the shutdowns that has been happening amongst others, but they've got a tracker that's up and running. And since this is largely based on media reports and both offline and online, it's restricted. We don't have any information that's coming from the government. So there's very little understanding as to why it's happening and how exactly, other than based on these reports. In 2019, so far, that's till June, we've seen about, I think, 59 shutdowns in India so far, and a large portion of them, which is about 44 if I'm not wrong, have been seen in Jammu and Kashmir. So you can see that maybe the reasoning behind that was probably because of like security purposes. But we've also seen UP having a shutdown, a suspension of services based on fake video clippings, which also showed that was because of civil unrest. That could have been a reason. And even in Orissa, what happened? There was a 48-hour preventive measure taken, owing to what they saw as conflict that could have taken place between two different groups. So it gives us somewhat an understanding of what the reasoning could be behind these shutdowns, but largely from a very official point of view, there hasn't been too much from the government that has come out that we know exactly why it's happening.
Joanne, can you also perhaps build on what you see as the impact of internet shutdowns on people and different sectors, really? No, it's not just people who are impacted by internet shutdowns in that sense. So could you perhaps explain what it means to have internet shutdowns?
Well, largely to my understanding, I think it's a complete inaccessibility to to your services, your internet services. For example, like I mentioned, the example of the suspension that happened because of an examination. It was in order to prevent cheating, so that it would have cut out your internet access, your ability to contact anyone outside that little area that the shutdown was. So people often don't have the ability to use their mobile services or their internet services, and this would largely, although it might seem like it's being done for the right reasons, it could possibly result in even more confusion and just unrest, as far as I can convey it.
Thank you, Joanne. What's really problematic about internet shutdowns, in a sense, is that it sort of completely isolates people and sort of pushes them against a wall into total darkness of information and communication, right? So one of the key consequences, especially during times of unrest, is the inability to be able to communicate the fact that you're safe, or you need something to be safe to the outside world. And also the consequences to emergency services in an increasingly digitalized world where your money is digital, your health services are digital, then it sort of blocks you out in that sense, right? Alexander, can we move to you from there and try to get a sense of the Russian experience of what is the environment in which it's happening, and is there regulation that helps state to do it, or is it outside the regulatory framework that it happens?
Well, actually, in Russia, we have only one case of proven governmental shutdown. It was happened in Republic of Ingushetia, and firstly, it was reported by staff of operators, so there was a kind of mass protest running in Ingushetia. It's North Caucasus, mostly Islamic region of Russia. So there was mass protests in the capital of that region. And for some reasons, at the territory where protests were running, the data transmission of most cellular operators was stopped. Actually, and I think in any other countries also, there is a regulation which allows law enforcement agencies to stop telecommunication services to be provided in case of emergencies, dangers, and others. So one of end users filed a claim to regulator saying that telecommunication services wasn't provided well by his operator. And he got a reply that telecommunication services was suspended by request of Federal Security Services. So that's why we know that it was official governmental shutdown. Security services have no obligation to report information about, well, their actions. They're top secret because of national security. But in this case, this information have been leaked, and now we officially say, yes, there was one shutdown. We are not sure that such way of discovering shutdowns will be available for us in Russia in future, because, well, security services doesn't like where their actions became public. But hope this method will work in future. There were some other events which might be looking like governmental shutdowns by security services, but we are not sure that also may be like of network failures. So in Ingushetia, all operators have stopped data transmission in the center of the city, but there were some other cases in the same location and other locations that, for example, one operator have stopped data transmission, but other network operators was working well. So regulatory framework for shutdowns in Russia exists very well, because the telecommunication law gives obligation to officially license the ISPs to stop providing services on request by law enforcement agencies. That's one thing. Another thing which already exists, we do not have many numbers of shutdowns. But another thing which exists in Russia, and it does not fall very well into definition by ITS now, we have content blocking system, which was introduced for sure for providing safety of children. But since our government thinks that these systems allow them to control information flows, which is the reason for shutdowns, much better and with with fine granulations. So it works like a kill switch, but for selected resources which government does not like, or again, or even local government does not like. So it's nowadays it's very complex and very complex and diverse kind of structure which allows content blocking, which allow blocking content and different kinds of information, and actually nearly any unwanted by governments information could be blocked for a good reason. So in this case, maybe talking about shutdowns in Russia, we should shift a little to content blocking, which is very, very effective and actively used by government.
Further on the content blocking aspect, right? What do you mean by content blocking? What kind of content is being blocked, and who are the people who it's being blocked from? Is it en masse, or is it particular demographies, or what is it?
It's usually blocked websites. So in this case, it does not have geographical. So if content is decided to be illicit or illegal in Russia, it may be done by courts, even by local courts, and by different state agencies, depending on which content. So financial fraud is defined by tax services. For example, information for protection children by Roskomnadzor or customer protection services. So there are, I think, about 11 or 13 different agencies defining which information should be blocked. Then resource identifiers are being collected by Roskomnadzor, Russian regulator, who keeps list, and then he uploads this list to ISPs who have to block such information, made it unavailable for all its customers. So we do not have localized illicit content. If content decided to be illegal, it have to be blocked everywhere in Russia.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what kind of content is generated?
Okay, they started from protection of children, so it had be drug production and drug consumption information. Then information about suicides. So our children that can find information, should not find information on the internet how to commit suicides, and child information and child abuse images and such kind of information. They started from this. Then they added copyright protected information, DMCA like. Then they added information related to terrorist organization, terrorist activity. And then, then it started being like waterfall, financial cheating. Also, local courts could add another harmful children information like gay propaganda, whatever it means. And we have some resources blocked because they are being gay propaganda. Usually, it's communities and web pages related to help to gay teenagers. So this information is usually also blocked in Russia. What else we have? Financial cheatings. Okay, gambling. Well, I'm already don't remember the completed list. Yeah, the most famous case maybe unblocked in Russia. It's Telegram case, but Telegram is being blocked like under the paragraphs of terrorist propaganda images or terrorist propaganda information. Personal data information. So personal data in Russia is protected very interesting way. So our regulation says that personal data of Russian citizens must be stored inside Russia. So if company fails to prove that it stores this information inside Russia, it can be blocked. For example, social network LinkedIn is blocked in Russia because they refuse to store, Russian customers' personal data inside Russia. It was kind of demonstrative act. Yes, we can block anything, any social network, whatever else.
So Telegram was blocked for the encryption aspect, or was it for the?
It's a bit more comprehensive case, but they refuse to provide decryption keys. And then they're being blocked under the paragraphs of terrorist information. So by the same agency who decides which information is terrorist, and it's this office of attorney of the state.
So Alexander,
But they are not effectively blocked actually.
but you still can use Telegram.
Yeah, because Telegram trying to avoid blockage, so they carefully, because they know how internet works much better than Russian regulator, Russian government, and Russian special services. So they're really possible to avoid blockings. So it's about how to deal with shutdowns actually, and they're using a completely technical way. Maybe we should also a bit later discuss about other technical ways of avoiding shutdowns.
So maybe we can already kind of start that discussion, right? So now we have a kind of clearer sense of how apps are blocked, how the network is blocked, how jamming happens, how dropping of the bandwidth happens. And there's pretty clear understanding that it has real impacts, right? So what has been the response to this? Because clearly there's people who are users, everyday users are impacted. I'm sure the technical community is impacted, but there's also an economic impact of it on the private sector, right? But from your mind, what has been the broad responses to network shutdowns?
In case of Russia, Russian content blocking, all these services started discovering other ways of delivering their information. So if it's not like app which is own network infrastructure, if it's not Telegram, the information services started bringing their information different way, having pages of Facebook, having pages on most social networks, using like domain fronting. So in most cases they are finding technical ways, in addition for example for bringing public audience, public awareness on what's going on. The first three resources which were blocked and still blocked as terrorist information providers was actually three major opposition information resources. And they started legal processes asking government, okay, we are blocked as because we contain information about terrorism propaganda, and whatever else. So they started legal lawsuit, and they were not possible to get this information. So it was response kind of attorney of the state say something like, we could not distribute terrorist information, so we could not tell which information of on your website is terrorist. So and I think that one of this was popular opposition blogger Alexei Navalny, and he was using blogging platform like Journal, so he deleted his blog completely, and only after that, well, he was released from blogging. But he moved his blog to another standalone one, and it still works.
Before we move to Raman, I had one last question. So is the use of virtual private networks, VPNs, legal in Russia?
Yes, VPNs are legal in Russia. Maybe the difference from other Asian countries that Russia pretends to be Western kind of democracy. And everything is done by the rule of law. So it's content blocking, unlike in many other countries. In Russia have to be somehow transparent and completely done by the rule of law. So unlike Iran or China, information which is being blocked is somehow publicly available. So it's available for operators because they have to block it, and civil society activists make this information available more publicly. Like, for example, Roskomsvoboda keeps this list. On right from me is civil society and technical community activist Phil Coolin, who collects and makes statistics about number of IP addresses and domains which are being blocked publicly. So he's not sure about perspective of freedoms in Russia.
Okay. Actually, I lied about that being the last question because I have one more. Since you say that at least the ISPs have the list, have you found it, in Russia at least, has it been possible for you to get that kind of information freely from the ISPs? Has there been transparency from the ISPs association?
We do not have strong association of ISPs in Russia. So most of ISP associations acts like gongos. So, but some ISPs provide this information to civil society activists, and these lists are being published on different resources, on daily and with fresh updates.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Raman, are you able to hear us?
I am.
Okay, Raman. So building on that, can you perhaps reflect a little bit more about the regulatory environment within which the network shutdowns are imposed, and what sort of solutions might possibly be there for people or civil society to push back? But I'd also like to get a little bit of sense from you on what has been the private sector's response to network shutdowns.
Fantastic. I'm happy to take both of those. And I'll talk about the regulatory environment first. And I'll also go to what Alexander flagged, right? That, the issue about content blocking versus shutdowns. And that's in fact it's an issue, like, let me say, it's not new. In the Keep It On coalition, it's been discussed very often. And one of the focuses has been to look at internet shutdowns very specifically as a separate but related issue to content blocking, but to recognize that some forms of content blocking in states can reach the level of internet shutdown. But why I mention this is that it causes different regulatory regimes to exist in different countries. In some countries, the content blocking regulatory regime is nearly the same one, or is in fact the same one, used for internet shutdowns. In other countries, it's different. And one of the things, interestingly, just speaking from now a slightly more formal legal perspective, is because internet shutdowns are even more offensive to the internationally protected right to free speech, as well as other rights, including your right to association and to access information that are protected in international law, including the UN Declaration of Human Rights, of course, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as regional conventions such as the European Convention of Human Rights and the Inter-American Convention and the EU Convention on Human Rights. But why I mention that is, for example, Russia is a signatory, just by way of example, to the European Convention of Human Rights as well separately. And if you look at that regime itself said that wholesale blocking of a specific website in order to block one particular instance of content on a website would be a disproportionate restriction on free speech. This came out of Turkey when Turkey was blocking access to Google documents, and then later to other sites as well, in order to block allegedly specific bits of content that was illegal in Turkish law, apparently, although it was argued that it wasn't an actual illegal act of content, but act of political speech. But that is regarded as a disproportionate restriction on free speech. Now, if you look at an internet shutdown, blocking of access to the internet as a whole in order to target one or two bits of content, or to even target multiple forms of communication, is just definitely disproportionate. This is what is there now and said multiple times by the different special rapporteurs who have spoken to this topic, particularly David Kay, who is the UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression. It's also an extension of the UN's own resolutions on internet freedom, which have talked about disproportionate restrictions to block content being a violation of international speech, and shutdowns being an especially egregious form of that. And why I mention this is therefore the regulatory regimes in countries varies. And like, this is the unfortunate reality. So this is a statistic from the Keep It On report of 2018, which is available on the Access Now website. If you go right now to the homepage, it's linked there. And otherwise, you just type, I can give the URL for those who are interested later. There have been 196 documented shutdowns in 2018 in 25 countries. And while there's been an increasing mobilization against this, and I'll talk about that later, the reality is these different shutdowns operate under very different regimes. As Joanne mentioned, for example, even in the Republic of India, and while it's one nation, it's a federated country with many states, there even internet shutdowns, although there's a regulatory regime under a union government set of regulations, the temporary network suspension orders, even those aren't always followed. State governments and even city authorities and police agencies sometimes don't use the union government regulations for that. They sometimes use emergency powers and they use police powers. And that's a common trend we've seen in other countries as well. Often it is the use of emergency powers, and in other places it is the use of, as other people, as Alexander mentioned, right? the special powers that telecom regulators have and the sort of license agreements they have with telcos to force an internet shutdown. Because often there's an emergency order exception written into most telecom licenses or into the telecom law. That said, even those regulatory regimes can be challenged. And I'll give you an example from last year. In the case of Pakistan, internet shutdowns were being issued by the Pakistan Telecom Authority, the PTA. And a lawyer by the name of Umair Gilani challenged that. And he said, yes, of course, it's a restriction of the right to free speech in Pakistani law. But his main argument before the Islamabad High Court, which is a state high court there in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, was that actually the telecom law of Pakistan did not give that power to the regulator. And he actually won in his initial hearing. That case is now subject to appeal, and the government's been able to temporarily suspend that high court order. But what that lawyer found was that even under telecom law, you can convince judges that a network shutdown may not be not necessarily proportionate power, but it may not be provided for in the actual law passed by their country's parliament. In other cases, for example, in Africa right now, in East Africa, in Cameroon, as well as in other states in Chad, there are legal challenges proceeding to whether internet shutdowns are legal under those countries' legal systems, particularly in telecommunications law as well. So we're seeing this thing. So what I was trying to stress to you, the regulatory regime for shutdowns is not always clear. It greatly varies from state to state. At the very least, it's often under emergency powers in telecom laws or emergency police powers. In other countries, it's sometimes issued under national security legislation. In some countries, they have general laws about telecom suspension. In a few other cases, even sometimes courts issuing shutdown orders saying it's urgent, or that's a very rare circumstance. But to go to your second related question, Gayatri, on the private sector, and I'll then pause after this, is that we see a lot of scope for the private sector to do more. We're already seeing the private sector say, yes, we need to push back more on internet shutdowns. And by here, I mean the private sector, I mean the telecom companies globally. Many of them are increasingly trying to do more, but we think they can do better. And to give you an example, even from my home country, there was an economic consultancy report published by the Indian Council for Research in International Economic Relations, ICRER, ICREER. It was a report which looked at what is happening on internet shutdowns, and it gave economic data as to that. But the more interesting point they said was it is very hard to detect if shutdowns are happening. Often it's based on anecdotal evidence in press reports, or sometimes you see government agencies making it public that yes, an internet shutdown is occurring. Why can't the private sector, telecom companies, more publicly tell their users? And secondly, why can't they make this data available on a transparency report on either that telecom company's website or perhaps on a telecom association website? So there's much more that can be done there. And I'm happy to go a bit more into more questions on the private sector. I'm conscious I've spoken for a while, so I want to pause and let you ask me more questions.
I mean, I'll come back to you, but actually that's a great point you made about the telecom sector, right? And I'm looking around the room and I can see a few faces here from the telecom sector. So perhaps I'm going to throw the question to them about what do you feel about these network shutdowns?
Heard a lot from the India and from the Russia. Now see the situation of the service provider, and especially the private sector. We are crushed between the public and the government, and we cannot do of our own. Even we cannot block the content, we cannot shut down the internet for any second, because apart from the public, the civil society is also there. Very recently, the number of shutdown in India is quite high. The reason, very recently, Burhan Wani, the terrorist, and his death anniversary was there. And the local government and the central government felt that there will be some disturbance of spreading the message on the so-called communication message, especially in India, WhatsApp. So they have shut down. The internet shutdown was there. Lot of terrorism issue into the Kashmir. Again, the same. So if you see the number which John and Ramanjit has told you that in our home country the shutdowns are more, mostly are into the Kashmir area where we are badly hit with the terrorism. Apart from that, like during the election time, because recently there was a Lok Sabha election, so during the election time, especially into those area where the polling booths are there, or especially where the area where that machines has been EVM was kept, government tried to switch off the complete jam over that area, so that no fake news, no confusion should be created that there is something going on with the EVM tampering. Local peace maintenance is also one of the issue. As Raman has told that emergency power, now the local authority is misusing this as an emergency power. When they feel that we should be using this power to control the communication within the public, to maintain the peace, they use this emergency power. And sometimes the news are not coming into the public, the news are not coming into the press. They are directly going to the service provider of that area and saying switch it off. So these are some of the issues which are affecting the internet. But sometimes we feel that for maintaining the peace, this is necessary. Otherwise, in diversified country like India, we can go anyway. Like you rightly pointed out about the blocking of the content. Blocking of the content is also very, I will say, crucial, especially child sex abuse. In India now we are not using the word child pornography because pornography is always with the consent. Here it is the child sex abuse. We are blocking all the child sex abuse content, especially because our Supreme Court has directed us, as well as our government has directed us. Apart from that, lot of courts orders coming about the IPR issue, like when the new movie is getting released, so we should be blocking those websites which are going to release the movie before the official release of the movie is also a very big concern. And encryption issue, like you are saying about the telegraph, that the telegraph is not.
Can you introduce yourself? Sorry.
I'm Rajesh Charya. I'm wearing a lot of hat. I'm the president of the Internet Service Providers Association of India. I am the Secretary General as well as the Executive Council member of EPINIC, and I also am the MAG member of the United Nations IGF.
So I'm just going to ask you one last question, and then and maybe some of the other teleco friends that are here could also answer. And you have a question?
I just one small question. In Russia, you told me that the telegraph was blocked. Telegram was blocked because they were not sharing the decryption key. What about the WhatsApp? That is the end-to-end encrypted.
I just intervene. I think that was about terrorist propaganda content, but I let Alexander Flagg talk about that more because Alexander, I think, specifically said it wasn't about encryption. I just thought I'd intervene with that observation.
Sure, if we registered what you said, can you repeat it?
I was just saying that I think Alexander spoke about the fact that Telegram's been blocked under the extremist content propaganda regulations or laws in Russia, less so about encryption specifically. So I'd love to hear from Alexander to talk about that more because it's actually not being blocked because of encryption.
It's a complicated case because due to Russian regulation, which I have to talk more than 10 hours to explain how it works, they have not provided FSB with session messenger keys as they are obliged by regulation. The case was really close to San Bernardino iPhone case, which is well known. So it was really the same case. But Telegram was not able to provide such keys because session keys are not being stored and even perfect forward secrecy. About WhatsApp. They just did not came to WhatsApp yet. So on Telegram, because it was founded by a former Russian who ran away, it was like a demonstration of power, like blocking of LinkedIn. Now they're slowly approaching Google with Google and Facebook. But slowly they, for example, was fined for like $50 for personal data and something like. So they just keeping them on hook, showing, if you want, we will block you. But again, it will be done under other regulations because Russia, European country, part of European Council of Europe, so they can do just randomly. They should prove a legal thing. But I want to reply to your information actually. In Russia, all this content blocking is implemented on account of ISPs. And the problem with content blocking, and I think shutdowns in other countries because it's just bigger one, and especially with a case you provided with kind of like child abuse images, content blocking and internet shutdowns do not help to fight the event itself. It's like an ostrich who kites his head into the sand, thinking that nothing happens. So, first of all, it does not, child abuse information content blocking does not help to fight production of child abuse. Terrorist information content does not help against terrorists. Then when in a diverse society, instead of bringing peace itself, shutting down internet, hoping there will be no riots, does not help to bring this peace in future. So any content blocking, and I think shutdowns also, doesn't help to find any evidences. Again, this colleague is also a hosting provider, and he likes to bring to public cases when he was found illicit information by his customers, and he went to police and saying, okay, we have a customer with illicit information, with cheating and other, please do something. And they went back saying, no, just block it. We send it to blockage. So that's one thing. Another thing, why governments like to block content or perform shutdowns coming to ISPs. Because ISPs are here. ISPs have network infrastructure. ISPs have customers. ISPs have bank accounts. ISPs have offices. Terrorists doesn't have offices. They hide somewhere in the caves of Afghanistan, whatever else. It's difficult to go to find terrorists somewhere. It's difficult to find child abuse content production. Actually, it is said that in Russian police fights is effectively enough. So they reported, and we have to trust them, that they closed nearly all such production farms, which was 10 years ago, very massively. So they fight it effectively somehow. But this content blocking, again, does not help against the event they're going to block. So, and together, again, having possibility to implement such content, again, in Russia it started with protection of child and protection against child abuse. But it spills off to full-scale censorship system. The most of the content which is being blocked is not related to this one. If you are a technical person, for example, what is the size of routing tables of the internet now? It goes up to 1 million of prefixes. But in Russia, there are about 200,000 IP addresses or resources have to be blocked. So in some cases, Russian ISPs trying to block content under Russian regulations have to have 10% more routing power, de facto even more, to their equipment. So development of internet is becoming much slower than in other countries like United States and Western Europe, who do not have to implement, like Australia and New Zealand, who do not have to implement such systems. That's a really, really negative impact on internet in our countries. Well, for the good purposes like children's safety, but de facto it isn't.
I had one question after which we should really move to the room to see if anybody had any other questions or comments or to share a different experience as such, right? In your experience, and perhaps other teleco friends from Nepal and Bhutan can also add, or other teleco friends in the room that I might not necessarily know. Does the user get any sort of intimation that the internet is going to be down or shut down before it is done? Do they get any sort of warning?
No, there is no warning coming because this come as a surprise. Because when the government thinks that this may cause some disturbance, so the immediately orders are going to the
ISP just shuts it down
service provider and we shut down.
Oh, okay.
But nowadays, technological advancement, we are going in a way, we are developing the things that we are not going to do the 100% internet shutdown. We are going to pick and choose. Like if we have to see that in some area we have to block the WhatsApp, in some area we have to block the Facebook, or in some area we have to block XYZ application, we can do that. So the things are into the development, and very soon we will be implementing that then your problem that isolation, will be no isolation. You will be using the internet as usual, but some of the application may be going dark.
Oh.
That's one of the things. Filtered blocking. Even into the WhatsApp or into the other communication media, we have come out with the solution that we can block the video. That you can do the chatting, but you will not be able to download or see or anything in regards to video or the picture.
All right.
So these things will resolve lot of issue due to this technological advancement.
Okay.
Gayatri,
Yeah.
once you're done with that, I'd like to come into to build
Yeah,
on what this
go ahead, give us your last comment, and then I'm going to open the floor.
So two quick comments. One, of course, is that the fact is that, and I know Rajesh well, but like me saying this, is the reality that today, if you were to ask many telecom providers globally, are they providing enough data about internet shutdowns? Because they are often compelled or stuck between the government and others. The reality is there's no information, and there's actually very little reason why that's the case. For example, today, interestingly, under the actual regulations for network suspension rules in India, this is just one example, there are other ones as well, there is no confidentiality requirement for those orders in law. So telecom operators today, including Rajesh's members, including the members of groups such as GSMA affiliates, such as the Cellular Operators Association of India, or even arguably GSM association members globally, should be publishing on their websites of all their country affiliates, their entities, number of shutdown orders they receive. Because if they aren't challenging shutdown orders, and by the way, ISPs in some countries have actually legally challenged shutdown orders. They have, put money where their mouth is and gone and said, how is this legal? How is it okay? They've received responses because, by the way, and my fun story, I've advised telecom companies in the past. Telecom companies challenge governments on revenue share orders, on regulations all the time, every 2 years, every year. So it's good for them to do more on this. But at the very least, let's start out with more data. And today, I hope this is something that Rajesh takes to his members. All ISP AI members in India should consider at least making his association host all of this information there and available there. And Rajesh, if you need help on that, I'm happy to chat about this when you're back. But the other thing I wanted to leave to you a little bit about the issue that people have said about, for example, blocking video content, is that's a dangerous route for telcos to start going down because it puts them, in fact, quite likely to be targeted for violating network neutrality regulation. So unless government authorities are able to clearly show that, say, blocking access to particular content streams like video or particular layers is somehow legal under their country frameworks, and I recognize this is not true of many countries, but at least in the European Union, at least in India, and in a bunch of other countries, they have network neutrality regulation in place. Unless governments are able to show to operators and private companies that, yes, we have the legal power to ask you to, in fact, discriminate on certain forms of content, that is going to likely result in a clash. So that's what me speaking ahead, saying that it's perhaps better to be cautious about some of the push from law enforcement agencies in some countries who are saying, oh, why don't you just be able to block a particular application or perhaps, just throttle or basically jam video services, that is something that's probably going to result in clashes with other public policy imperatives like network neutrality. Although that's my limited set of points. So now I'd love to hear from the room.
Well, I've also sought permission to extend the session for a few more minutes than 2:30, which is barely 4 minutes away. So we will extend the session a little bit longer because we have the space. But I kind of wanted to take lead from the moderator this morning and try to do a poll in the room. How many people in the room know of internet shutdowns in their countries or in their context? Know that internet shutdowns happen in their countries? It's about, yeah. Well, So it's about more than half the room, right? So with that, I would like to sort of open to the floor to see if are there different experiences, questions. Sita?
Maybe you should ask first, does internet shutdowns happens in your countries?
Yeah.
In whose countries internet shutdown happens?
Oh, sorry.
So no, you not just know about internet shutdowns, but
no internet shutdowns happens in your country.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess the reframing of does internet shutdowns happen in your country?
Yeah.
Is it the same number, pretty much? Yeah. Oh, sorry. So there's an addition.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe somebody does not know details about.
Okay. Okay, got it. So, Sita, can you introduce yourself for the transcription, please?
Yeah, my name is Sita Laksmi. So I would like to ask actually with the panel about the definition of internet shutdown. Because in Indonesia, we have a lot of clock blocking or filtering of the content. Recently, we had these elections and we are really divided into two candidates. And there was big riots in Jakarta into 21st and 22nd of May, and the government decided to minimize the sharing of the content in WhatsApp. Basically, because there are a lot of hoax and disinformation along these years. So not only during this election, but also prior to this election. So there are a lot of hoax and disinformation about that as well. And in my point of view, as a Jakartans, as a people living in Jakarta, I trust the government to do that because at some point I think it's necessary to be done at that point because 21st and 22nd was remind me of what happened in Indonesia in 1998 when the Suharto we toppled down Suharto. So I agree with that with the decision. So I would like to discuss with you actually as a panel. We have this a lot of interest coming in and a lot of something much bigger than we thought, like terrorism or in my opinion, in Indonesia, it's almost like we are almost breaking as a country, as divided as really two, either totally left or totally right. So there will be something that I worry that it will happen. So I understand if the government should put down the WhatsApp conversation, especially for sharing content, video, and pictures. That's my first question. The second question, how about the responsibility of intermediary, meaning the content platform itself, Facebook, Twitter, because there are a lot of Twitter accounts in which during those time after Indonesia election, which I already complained to Twitter, and many of my friends will complain because so many hoax informations and a lot of incitement of hatred basically really shown in the Twitter, but Twitter did not do anything. So how about if we have to deal with internet shutdown in Asia Pacific, can we just have some kind of measurement on what should we do as a platform, what should we do as a platform, as a government, what should we do, and also as an ISP as well. ISP actually the one that really has nothing to do with it, in my point of view, yeah. I mean, content platform and government and public, it's more responsible. I don't know, it's for discussion. Thank you.
I just wanted to, do you want to take all the questions or go one by one?
It's a difficult question.
Yeah, so maybe can we try to just address this question and then maybe take, unless yours is related.
Sorry, there's a question from the chat.
Oh, yeah.
It's also a long question. Is that okay?
For this one.
Okay, let's try to tackle this
Okay,
one.
this is from Mocha. Oh, sorry.
Why don't we just discuss this issue first and then go on to the next
Yeah,
one?
shall we do that? Well, I wanted to quickly give sort of also what I've heard in previous similar panels and some with Raman as well. The thing is, network shutdowns are a lazy solution. Yeah, it's really not, it's a non-solution really, because from my understanding, no terrorist is actually using these networks. They have far more infrastructure than the networks that a common person is using. So A is that problem, and B is network shutdowns take away the responsibility of law enforcement officials from doing their job and shifting it to just pretending that this content doesn't exist. Because if there's going to be riots, then it's the law enforcement's job to prevent that riot. It's not enough if you just shut, because what that results in is that the sentiments remain, and it's just that you don't have a particular channel to get it through. So I mean, so there's one. So I think the broader question is whether we agree that network shutdowns are acceptable or not. And I think in this regard, we have to look at the international norms for it, right? The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Assembly and Association just 2 weeks back released his report at the Human Rights Council saying that network shutdowns are unacceptable under any circumstances, that they're illegal. Because it's not only freedom of expression, assembly, association, it's right to education, livelihood, emergency services, health, even right to life that's impacted, right? So there's one part of it. So it's also the legality of it. So in my opinion, network shutdowns would never be acceptable, at least that I think is would be my position as a civil society person, perhaps. And the question of definition, in the beginning of the session, we tried to no. It's good for us to refresh ourselves as well. I mean, in the beginning of the session, we tried to look at a few definitions, but maybe Alexander, would you like to take that question and see?
Well, actually, there was sharply definition by SS now, who gave colleagues, and you can read it. I have it written in Russian. Yeah. But I want to respond to the second part of question about liability of intermediaries and ISPs. First of all, why internet is so? I'm representative of technical community here. So why internet became so successful? Because de facto, on the lowest level, on the IP protocol level, it's just forwarding packets. All your information and be cut on small pieces. So maybe. And just brief excursion of how internet works. So all information is cut on little pieces, and on each pieces have a destination address of where this packet have to be delivered. And any ISPs, any equipment on the internet, not end user devices, not server, but all infrastructural equipment should look only on IP address and deliver packet next to other device, looking on destination IP address. That's make all internet equipment much simpler than telecommunication equipment was before. Simpler, cheaper, more development, and then it's developed by spiral. So that's we know internet as it is now. Well, it came from United States. They have no content restrictions on this case. So internet developed very well because of this. No ISP in democracies have to look into inside content. If you have to look inside content, then you have to spend much more resources. And your internet, you have to spend much more money. So, for example, United States ISPs. So, yes, you can make, like in Russia, ISPs responsible for this content somehow. But then you're bringing your internet backwards compared to, for example, United States. So that's. You can make it legally, you can make it in your legal framework, but you are throwing your internet backwards. And maybe a short reply to the first question on that shutdown could stop riots. Not definitely. It's much better to work as in society to make just riots unacceptable in your community, in your country, for the people themselves, not because they are coordinating riots via WhatsApp.
Just a clarification, it's not a shutdown in Indonesia, it's just a throttling so from WhatsApp. So it's only sharing video and pictures we cannot.
Yeah, and I think Raman's point was about that. No, it's the danger of making so many people adjudicators of what can be shared and what can't. So, okay, I'm just going
ISPs cannot be, you are right that ISPs cannot be held responsible because we are the highway provider and we are not doing any deep packet inspection. And if government force ISP to do the policing, that in that case, what I suggest and what I've suggested into the department meeting, that all the police stations should be privatized and the police now will belongs to the public own. That they will be doing all the things, then what the government will do. Yeah. The central monitoring system established by the government should be responsible for everything, what they direct to the private sector, ISP, because that's the very easy path to twist the arm of the private ISP because they are localized and they are governed by the license. At the same time, I'm just responding that the content provider or the intermediary, they should be held more responsible. Reason, they are making money from that country by giving the content, and if they will not be getting controlled by the government, then the ball will come again in the court of service provider. This should not be. Recently, the government of India has arm twisted WhatsApp. They have now come out with that you cannot forward the message more than 5. They have arm twisted that you have to create a local office. They have created the nodal officer locally. So this should be the responsibility of the government to arm twist these content providers so that they should not go freeway.
Okay, I'm going to have to really open the floor now because, but that was a really interesting discussion. Thanks, everyone. Any other questions or comments? I know Anju had one. Yeah. Can you identify yourself for the transcription, please?
Hi, I'm Anju and I'm from Fiji. I just wanted to point out something, and this is to what you said in terms of the revenue. I think, was it you or I can't remember who. Anyway, how much money is lost when there's an internet shutdown? And can that be like a solution to actually telling the government, you lose a lot of money just because you are shutting the internet down? I'm not sure what type of solution can be done for that, you know.
During these times when the internet shutdowns are taking place, the government cannot estimate the loss of revenues because that's the above the peace of the country.
I think actually that was a comment Raman mentioned, and then Alexander also has response. Raman, would you like to take it first?
I can try address all the questions, Gayatri. I'm just conscious of time.
Could you take the last question about the money aspect of it? How come even money is not a good enough factor to stop this?
Well, the data is out there in terms of how much it costs, and I can give you like numbers. Data has been estimated in India, I know, to be in fact a couple of $1 billion based on conservative estimates earlier. I think that one of the challenges with that is it depends on what's supposedly driving government, and there's a little bit of a classist piece there as well. Because when they don't shut down fixed line access in mainstream parts of a country, but they allow mobile internet, they block mobile internet, it is basically saying, okay, public sector banks or financial services will continue working, and that's really what we care about. If other people who are affected, are impacted, like that's, tough cookies, they can go home and use their fixed line internet or use their office internet. That tends to discriminate against the poor the most. So I'm being very brutal with you. It is partly not influence policy makers in government ministries sometimes, because I think there's a certain degree of class bias that's going on there. The other reality is that people, of course, in a crisis situation, as you may have heard even from the person from Indonesia who raised that question, right, about situations happening, how do they do it? If push comes to shove, a law enforcement official, city government person, or even ministry person, if it's a worry about losing money, versus say being accused of not acting, they will say, I would rather, cover my behind, to use the English term, and like order a shutdown just to be seen as doing something. And this is not me saying this. I have heard this from multiple government officials saying, we know a shutdown wasn't effective. We had to be seen as doing something. We did it. And nobody can accuse us later of not having tried to do something. And that's dangerous policy in my views, but that's one reason why the economic numbers point has not been as effective with some governments as has been. But let's wait and see, because it's only early days. We still actually don't know the full scale of economic harms of shutdowns. The little bit of data that is out there is still very conservative. But that's just to answer that point.
All right, and a quick answer from Alexander.
Yeah, very quick answer. There is a project called NetBlocks which counts this, and firstly, it was called Turkey Blocks. So people from Turkey, by the way, I do not see anyone on this conference. They made this project for their country because there was content about shutdowns because of riots and elections and something like that. But then they modified it to work globally. So that's exactly, you may say your country and say how long internet is shut down and see exact numbers. Well, it's approximation, but the funniest thing that's in Russian legislation approving sovereign internet, the government also uses an argument. Look, if Americans turn off Russian internet, we will suffer such losses.
Okay, and yeah, go ahead. So,
hello everyone, this is Amrita from Nepal. I'd like to put one question to the floor. We talked about the internet shutdown in a broader term, right? So what about the shutdown, like blocking of content, so social media and some website in the organization? Does it come under the internet shutdown? And does it violate right of a human to the access? Is it legal or illegal? What is your view?
That's actually a fantastic question.
That is legal.
No, that's legal.
Legal.
You are there into the corporate for the working. At
Yeah.
that time, they are not allowing you to do the social network.
Not just social media, but also other website. Yeah.
I'd encourage you to just, if you give us a chance to try and answer your question.
Okay.
My comment there is, I don't think that's an internet shutdown. It is an act of blocking. Whether it's legal or not depends on where you work and which country you're in. For example, in some countries, employers don't have that right. In some countries, they do, but it can vary there. But I take that off saying that it's not an internet shutdown. It is an act of blocking and something that impacts your rights. But it's not an internet shutdown per se, unless your employer, for example, is a government agency blocking access to the internet as a whole. And there again, as a government employee in some countries, your rights are restricted. But I'd say I'd want to know more about those cases with you individually, but I wouldn't say it's an internet shutdown in my at least limited view. But thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the
Well, I
response.
think at least it's unacceptable. But anyway, any other questions?
There's a question.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Release mics.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Ananya from India. I think somebody mentioned about Orissa over here while discussing India. So, and you were talking about terrorism as in the legal system or the government cannot dodge their responsibilities by shutting down the internet. Since I'm from Odisha, I could give you a ground idea about the situation. So, this was a communal disharmony situation. And why the internet was shut down in this particular area, which is called Bhadrak. There was Hindu-Muslim communal tension in the area. And there were no terrorists in the area. They were just common citizens who did not agree with one another. The problem was, if the internet wasn't shut down, there were people who were propagating hate speech on the internet. There were people who were giving all wrong information. It could be any person from any religion was giving all wrong stories. Some other picture was, morphed and given like our people have been killed, join hands and kill more. It is in order to stop the propagation of wrong messages. In this case, I really don't think the police or the legal system is trying to dodge responsibility. We have to understand that the government and the legal system is also limited in its access. The government cannot be expected to go to each and every person's house and give a knock and say, please don't do this. We don't have that access. So in order to debar people or to constrain people from furthering the tensions, those 48 hours were crucial, and hence the internet was shut down. So I'm not in favor of shutting down internet every now and then, but if there is a legitimate reason in a country like India, terrorism is not just limited to terrorists. Anybody who creates terror is a terrorist. It could be anyone. So, in case of Kashmir as well, in the previous times we have found people have given all kinds of wrong information, and that has given birth to new kinds of hatred. We don't want that, and that's the last thing we want.
I'd like to comment. I think
Guy,
that in the case
whenever
of
you're
an
done,
internet...
I'm going to view on that as well. Sorry, but go ahead.
John Brewer here, representing myself only. But having worked as a network operator for 25 years, I think in the case where you have an internet shutdown, you have seen legislative and regulatory failure. You have failed if you must shut the internet down, and your goal should be to come up with more effective censorship so that you don't get to the point of shutting the internet down. Now, I think if we look at the experience of Russia, there is a lot of censorship, too much, but the amount of shutdowns is very low.
And censorship is also completely ineffective. Completely ineffective for the purposes it was declared for. So, but maybe we'll now get Mike and ask question. Yeah. Okay, you are representative of Yath.
I'm a student.
Yeah. May I ask you a question? If you receive on WhatsApp misinformation, like images showing that people of your religion as being killed or something terrible, would you go for the streets for riots?
Good question. See, in economics, the first statement that you study is every human being is expected to be rational, but not everyone is rational. All right. So I may not react, but there is still a probability that somebody else is going to react. This is infuriation, and we cannot rule out the probability that this could actually work as a provocation.
Okay,
It might be used.
I'd like to just, kind of resist, right? Of course, there's that fear. There's a fundamental fear. But that doesn't take away the responsibility to act as a sensible person from the individual and act as a responsible government from the government. There's a reason why they've been put in place. There's a reason why taxes are paid. And there's a reason why police are in place, right? The failure of the system should not be taken out on infrastructures, right? First question is that. And the second notion that anybody could be a terrorist, I think that's exactly the kind of violative, violent propaganda that the state peddles. Yeah, it's not that anybody can be a terrorist, and not that any situation can be a terrorist situation, because terrorism is quite high a threshold. So I think we should also be really careful about what and who we call terrorists, because that's
I clearly mentioned that anybody who terrorizes is a terrorist.
Yes,
I did not say anybody in particular is a terrorist. First
point.
Second one. Like I have mentioned, it's the government's duty. No doubt, it's a government's failure. All right, but I really think that people cannot be expected to be rational.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the sentiment. That is a sentiment shared by many people who justify network shutdown. It comes from human fear. It comes from human fear that something bad could happen. But then that doesn't take away from us the responsibility of thinking about whether this is a solution or whether it's a band-aid. Are you dealing with the symptom or are you dealing with the problem? Because you're dealing with the symptom if you're shutting down the internet. If you want to deal with the problem, the solution is much harder. And I'm happy to take this conversation further a little bit more, right? But we've got to think more about what are you solving. Are you solving the problem or not? But any other questions from the floor? Yeah.
If not, there's a small
from
intervention.
Sorry.
1 minute, Raman. Yeah.
Sorry, Raman. I wonder if you have answered the question by Malka Berry yet?
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Would you like to talk about it, Mr. Raman? Actually, I saw that your.
Can you read out the question, please?
The question is, as we all know, ICANN is running under U.S. jurisdiction. Can U.S. governments unilaterally, technically, and legally cut off internet access of one country or deprive other country of its digital resource based on verdict of American courts or U.S. President executive order? Does global community consider digital deprivation and digital sanctions on CCTLDs and digital resource as legitimate act based on American jurisdiction on internet digital core functions? Or it would be considered as an intervention to internal affairs of other country and wrongful act against human rights, like right of development, right of business, right of access to internet. I think there should be a global set of norms that restrict the right of dominant country for applying unilateral coercive measures in cyberspace with purpose of applying pressure on its strategic competitors in international relationship to achieve geopolitical and political interests? That's the question.
So I'll answer that one, and then I think I'll come back to just some of the main themes of the panel so you can close. But a quick one on that one. I think a large part of that question, I'll be honest, is I think outside the scope of this discussion, right? It is about ICANN and larger global cyber norm and geopolitical interests. What I would say is this about the question about, say, ICANN or any other part of the internet numbering system cutting off access to large bits of critical infrastructure in order to essentially cause a shutdown, because that's what we're discussing here. That's not occurred so far. That danger is one of the reasons why so many people have encouraged or pushed for the IANA transition, and for it no longer to just be the Department of Commerce's contract to one entity in the US. That's one reason why many groups, including my own, have in fact criticized US lawmakers who have sometimes said, oh, this IANA internationalization is a loss of US control and harms the internet freedom. We don't believe that's the case. But that's the limited situation where it's been so far, and it's, I don't think, impacted the topic of internet shutdowns. On more broader geopolitical perspectives, I think that's a panel for itself. And hopefully for a future APR IGF, that's a great topic suggestion. On this specific one about a little bit about law enforcement reactions. Look, I'd build on what Gayatri said, right? It's not just like a band-aid. It's like a person who has deeper issues slapping a band-aid on every 5 seconds onto a different part of their body and not realizing that's a problem, right? Like if you repeat the same thing over and over again, that's sometimes the very definition of being delusional. And one of the problems with internet shutdowns very often is you're not treating the law problem. I'm very sympathetic to law enforcement. who have these concerns. And I've spoken to them, so I'm not coming at it from that perspective. But just think about it as this, right? How many people have been prosecuted for supposedly sending those images or sending fake content? The job of the police is to find and prosecute. And of course, ensure public peace. But public peace is ensured by a rule of law system, not just by coercive state power. That's why many of us live in democracies with that basic premise. And if you looked at, for example, during the London riots, a proposal was made to shut down social media. And the response of the London Metropolitan Police Commissioner after the London riots, and he was asked that question saying, why didn't you shut down social media? He said two reasons. One, it would have been illegal for me to do that. Number two, frankly, it was more useful for me to leave it up because I could target and find out perpetrators and I could see who's posting content where. That's the response they had as police. And what I'd like to leave here with you also is the fact that when you shut down the internet, you might, for example, believe you're shutting down harmful messages or content that some people are sending. You're also shutting down the ability for minorities and for other people to say we are being targeted. And I think let's not forget the reality of our region. For example, just from India itself, where often minorities have been targeted by majoritarian interests. And in fact, the fact that they were being targeted, they were being killed, that genocide was being committed, was sometimes not reported because mainstream media did not carry their story. You can't have that in internet age, but now with an internet shutdown, you actually can. And that's why not every act of internet shutdown might be the majority community targeting a minority, but even one instance of that is too much and is dangerous. So you must stop that. And so I think we need to be very honest with each other on why shutdowns sometimes occur. But I'll leave you with that provocative way to end the panel and however Gayatri would see fit.
Thank you for already wrapping up the panel for me. That makes my job super easy. But thanks a lot. This was a really interesting, interactive discussion. And perhaps we'll carry on in different sessions the different aspects of this conversation, right? And the regulatory aspects of ICT laws in Asia, we'll be discussing tomorrow at 1:30. There are a few flyers here. Please feel free to take it. Thank you, Raman. Thank you, Alexander. And thank you, Joanna. And thanks, everyone, for taking part in this conversation. And hopefully next year we'll have better positions on network shutdowns, lesser figures.
Of shutdowns are not covered. A lot of aspects of internet shutdown are still not covered.
Yes.
We just touched it here, and I hope we'll continue discussion with such different opinions and possibilities, and maybe we could even be possible to summon some governmental persons. So thank you very much. Thank you for discussion.
Thank you also for taking so many questions.
Thank you for the questions.
Jam satu aja. Jadi Anda bawa, saya cari ruangan, ada posisinya betul-betul seperti presentasi gitu ya. Kalau ada teman-teman di lab IKOF, nanti di lab IKOF.
Mbak, bisa dengar Mbak? Mbak Betty? Mbak Betty?
Ya, can you hear me?
Ya, aku bisa dengar. Nanti ada satu pembicara lagi Mbak. Dia dari
Ya.
Jepang. Boleh masuk ya? Aku mau undang aja sih.
Boleh. Siapa namanya?
Namanya Kyosuke dari bentar. Namanya Kyosuke Kamimura dari Faculty of Language and Linguistic. Yeah, I can see you.
Orang Jepang ya?
Orang Jepang.
Okay, how do I look?
You look good.
Awful. Dreadful.
How do I look? Emang kelihatan.
Aku melihatmu setitik kursi di sana, sayang.
Iya.
Dengan segelas teh. I don't drink coffee.
Aku nggak minum teh lagi. Nggak minum kopi. Oke. Ya mudah-mudahan lancar ya Mbak. Ini belum kelihatan. Tadi si kue sih udah ada. Ya.
Oh, kue ada. Oke. Ya. I follow your order, ma'am. You are the moderator.
Ya, Mbak Betty yang pertama ya.
I'm the first one.
Ya,
Oke.
Mbak Betty pertama. Aku ngomong dulu sebentar perkenalan segala macam. Di situ Mbak Betty yang pertama. Ya. Oke?
Oke.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
You sit next to me? No, you sit here. Here.
Oh.
Next to me.
Oh.
So you can use
You can-
anything that you want,
You can take.
like in a
you can
class.
Take your, you can, if you sit here, you can take your mic here. You better sit here. Okay. Because it's round.
If you would like to use this, use
It's
this.
perfect.
Yeah. The problem, I don't have tissue to erase that.
Hey, do you know Lawrence Lassie?
I do.
That's
I don't know about this, but I do know him.
Okay. Okay. Can I change a little?
Ask away because he is the one that.
I invite him to Taiwan twice.
Because it's I have a little issue in here.
Okay, go ahead.
You can
What kind of
use
issue,
another.
okay.
Another. There's also word marker in
Do
another
you
color.
have an eraser?
No, we don't.
What?
Do you,
We have
do you have a tissue?
I'll give you some tissues. I don't have a. We don't have an eraser here.
What do you want to ask?
Do you have any tissue?
No, what do you want to ask?
Yeah. My thinking is that
No.
norm is so short is okay. It's okay. But the code. You better
Or we can get the tissue. I can get the tissue from the
The
toilet.
list
I have. You have? Okay.
is a can evolve from the original social order.
Can I have this?
The original social order is this way. If you read his book,
So this is the eraser.
Okay.
it's marked.
Okay, I know. Well, today's session is going to be.
No, I know, but you don't do that. I know what I'm going to say, so don't worry about it. Yeah, I know what I'm going to say. If you have a different point, you can draw another
Yeah.
map.
No, I'm not talking about my opinion. I just worry about.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not talking about my opinion. I just like to exclude of the precondition of the session,
Which is?
which is we just delete this. It's okay.
Fine. That's my comment.
No,
You can don't have you
No.
you can say you disagree my point,
No.
but why you want to erase that?
No, I'm not getting at you. I'm not going to.
You can do your own comment.
No.
Yeah.
So
Hi. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this session's workshop number 30, Ethics Behind Computing Machine, Raising Awareness of Digital Talents. So my name is Sita Laksmi. I come from Diplo Foundation. I'm based in Jakarta in Indonesia. And we have 3 speakers here on site and 1 speaker online. So we have Yun Chang Choi, we have Ko Wei Wu, Betty Purwandari, sorry, and Kei Suke Kamimura just joined us this afternoon. O'Neill, I quoted, she said, "Our own values and desires influence our choices from the data we choose to collect and the 2 questions we ask. Models are opinions embedded in mathematics." This is getting more relevant as many decisions are now being made by computer machines with AI, machine learning, and many methods that they are choosing. People behind it, the coders, the software engineerings, are the one that developing the programs, pretty much responsible in the programs that they are developing. So in the part of the world that I'm living, basically in Indonesia, we rarely discuss about it, this ethics behind the computing machines, the ethics for the coders, the ethics for the software engineerings. We rarely discuss about it. We discuss about digital economy, we discuss about innovations, we discuss about Industry 4.0, but we rarely discuss the behind these issues. So this is a roundtable discussion, so everybody is welcome to have a conversations, but we will have speakers first for igniting the discussions. We will have Betty Purwandari from Indonesia. She's the academic staff in the Faculty of Computer Science. We also have Ko Wei next to me, sitting next to me. Ko Wei is CEO of NII Enterprise Promotion Associations. We also have Eun Chang Choi, sit there. He is a Korean legal scholar at Seoul National University Law Schools and non-resident fellow of the Free Internet Project at Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. And we also have Keisuke Kamimura, professor at the Department of Japanese, Faculty of Language and Linguistics here with us. So most of the speakers will speak 10 or 5 to 10 minutes. At the most, and then we can have a discussions because this is a roundtable discussion. We start with Betty Purwandari, the one that also have the idea behind this workshop. I give the floor to you, Betty.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. I'm in Depok, Indonesia at the moment. Great, thank you very much. So this is my office. This is where I teach young people, undergraduate, and also master students. I teach them software engineering, and actually they are the ones who will develop programs that what Sita has mentioned. These programs have this kind of machine learnings and artificial intelligence insights. So they are the one who will lead users to click to fill out some things on the mobile application on our laptops. But at least in Indonesia, I realized that we don't put enough attention to train these young people to understand the consequences of codes or programs that they develop. So this is the idea behind the title, The Ethics Behind Computing Machines. We need to raise awareness of these young digital talents. So, excuse me, I need to ask Sita, do people can see my slides, Sita?
We can see you very clearly and hear you very clearly, but your slide, can the slide be up? Slide from Betty Purwandari?
Yes, please.
From Betty. Well, meanwhile we are waiting, we are also have some questions that you can think about while we are listening to the speakers. I also put it in the whiteboard there. The questions would
Yeah.
be, what do you think the current system for software engineers in Asia, in particular your respective countries, teachers, lecturers, lawmakers, and coders, should they work together? Should ethics be part of the curriculum, and how? Should we take part of this conversation more actively? And we have Asia approach that we call, focusing on economic growth and government as a parent that will solve all the issue. These are the questions that we would like to ask. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to. This is not the presentation from the last presentation. No, the other one. The last one. Just wait a moment, a technical problem. The last one from Jackie. Okay, I think we can start with Kowe first before we waiting for Betty.
Sorry about that.
Since we are waiting for another presentation to come in, I think we can start from Kowe first. 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yep. I tried to bring you to the chart on the left-hand side. That actually a very famous chart, actually from the Lowland ASIC. The Lowland ASIC actually talking about the social order, how to manage the social order by the 4 different factors. There's the first one is a law, the second one is a norm, the third one is a market. The fourth one, usually in the regular space, is nature. But in the cyberspace, the Lowland ASIC put a core there. And the reason why I try to bring this one in, just like the moderator said that, in all the Asia country, I think you know that all the government have a thinking. Their thinking is if we can train more capable programmer, then we can make more job. We can make our economy growth. That's basically the agenda of the governments. The government, I think not only in Indonesia, in Taiwan, in Japan, every country, Asian government have the same thinking. How to boom their economy is to train a capable programmer. But the issue is here. The issue is at the same time, because right now in the internet cyberspace, we have a lot of issue and problem, from cybercrime to the fake news. So it's kind of funny, the government actually didn't go to advice from the expert. They put into the regulation and law and try to stop the fake news, try to stop whatever, any kind of the cybercrime. And I don't know this is a good example or not a good example. For example, in Japan, that is last year they have a Mongamula. It's a copyright infringe. And the government, before advised the expert, the government decided we try to do the block IP. But when they began to advise the expert, lawyer, the scholarship, ask the ISP, they find that actually block IP is not that simple. It's much complicated than they think. And here is the issue: I draw there. You look at that. The code basically is developing by the programmer. And remember that who provide those jobs to the programmer is the market, the company. Some of the company you don't like it, it's a big technical company, Google, Facebook, whatever. So actually the market provide a good job for those programmer, and those programmer developing the code for those of the company, a market-driven company. And the government put into regulation in. What we miss, actually, that is what we are going to talk about today. We even don't have enough chance to talk about norm. In the basic point of view is except the regulation, except the market, we should have some kind of social norm. And that actually is about, I think it's about 1 month ago in the Euro-DIC. They tried to talk about the, in the beginning, the code maker, we call the programmer, code maker and lawmaker. The code maker and the lawmaker actually is a parallel. They don't dialogue each other well. If we want to make the dialogue between the regulator and also the market or the programmer, the much better way we can generate the dialogue to have a social norm development. And I think this is a major focus we try to talk about. What is the ethic we want to have? Is there is a chance we have an ethic, we have a social norm to balance the co-maker and lawmaker? I think this is a very critical issue for all of us, not only today. For example, the last session, there is people talking about a shutdown internet. And that is also is a similar issue. The social norm, shut down the internet is kind of, we find that is some bad thing in the internet. So, what we can do it? In here, can we change the internet operation? Or we should have a regulation in? As I heard, the people told me that it's because they don't have a regulation to take it down. So the only way they can do it is just shut down the internet. But everybody sit here, you can think about it. In that community, how many percentage of the content is a hate speech? Let's say 20%. Let's mean still 80% is not hate speech. But shutdown is not only shut down the hate speech, also shut down the 80% of regular information and useful information, maybe valuable information. Even possible, that is a living thing for you because I'm a programmer, I'm working on the marketing. You shut down the internet, then I cannot do my business. I lose my job. And so this is a kind of interesting, do we have only that kind of choices? That is a reason not only in Asia, also in the European. They try to talk about, is that possible we can generate a social norm to balance between the co-maker and the lawmaker? We could talking about lawmaker, usually it's a regulation enforced by government. And then the co-maker basically is, I'm here in the chart I'm thinking about is that there's a marketing-driven company, the Google, Facebook, and those of the programmer hired by the Google and the Facebook to generate, for example, the Facebook, you are living in the Facebook world. And for example, you are using the Apple, you are living by the Apple ecosystem. Do we have is it possible we can develop a social norm to have another way to solve the problem, the conflict between the market and the regulation? I think that is one of the, when I talk to the moderator, I think this is one thing I want to bring it up to everybody to thinking about it, because I think Asia is a little bit different because every time I was in the Europe or in the United States, the dialogue is much more, thinking about people can do something instead of just the market and the governments. But I think in here, from the opening till now, I think most of Asia people, me too, right? I live in Asia, I live in Taiwan. we usually figure out is if we have a problem, I mean, so-called problem, no matter is a cybercrime or fake news or whatever, we always put a question and say, government, do something to solve my problem. Right? This is a typical Asia country or culture. We never thinking about that, say, if there is a problem happen there, are we, the people, willing to take some kind of responsibility, also do something to solve the problem? And I question all of you. Give the question, ask the government to solve the problem, is the best solution for all, or really developing the disaster for everyone? Thank you.
Thank you, Kowe. So that's a social norm that you are mentioning, whether we have to have social norm before we think about ethics or something like that. So I think we can go to Betty now. See, we have the presentation. Betty, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Sita. Wait, then I can see my slide at the moment. Could I make it move to the next slides, or could someone do it for me, please?
Somebody is doing it for you.
Okay, yes. Please, the second slide then.
Next.
Next slide.
Oh, you can control it yourself.
Oh, I can do it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see
Technology is
now.
not that easy.
Yeah. So for people with computer science background, we are supposed to be familiar with ACM, the Association of Computing Machinery, because it's the biggest computing society where educators, researchers, professionals discuss together about the curricula, the recent research, published research papers, as well as the ethics. So in 2018, so it was quite recent, like a year ago, the ACM published the Code of Ethics and Professional Conducts. Here is the link that you can access. But what I learned, at least in Indonesia, we haven't really adopt this ethics in our curricula, especially to undergraduate students. Okay. So this is like the screenshot of the ethics. This is what we have mentioned, that computing professionals actions change the world. So we develop mobile application, we develop computer programming that make people put their data, some others can see their data, manipulate their data. So it really changed the world. But what are the consequences of what people programs that we haven't really careful? Okay. Oops, how to go to the previous slide? Yep. So apart from the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery Code of Ethics, there are also Software Engineering Code of Ethics and Professional Practices. The aims is to raise awareness that software engineers, the coders, the programmers, the one who develop the applications do good, not to cause harm. That the programs can influence others to do good or cause harms. Some things that I'm researching at the moment is call to action button, for example, on Instagrams, which is intentionally programs to trigger hedonism in shopping. So what software engineering should consider before they really put something like that on social media for e-commerce? That's what we need to consider. And we at the universities should make software engineering as something beneficial and respected professions. So here also the link of the software engineering code of ethics. Okay, sorry. Yes, these are lists of ethics from ASEAN, for software engineering, for Association of Information Technology, from IEEE. All of them try to promote honesty, integrity, and maintains high standard of quality, and also leadership in developing software with artificial intelligence inside. But then how to make this code of ethics part of daily practice in industry, in research, and in academics. So here I put pictures of puppets. Actually, when we put like on social media, we put heart on Instagram, for example. Actually, there are programs that really trigger us to do that. If we give comments, if we share information on social media, there are also algorithms, programs, but there are also the thinking that would manipulate us to do that. So we need to understand that this artificial intelligence has something to do with hacking, and we need to deal with two kinds of hackers. There are hack the technology. These are part of the software engineering's domain, but also hack the people, or we call human hacking with social engineering. When we trigger someone to buy something that she doesn't really need, just because people keep putting on the advertisement on her timelines, it's part of the social engineering. The one who have this kind of idea could be someone with business domain, but the one who put it programs are social engineering. Yes, and also Sita has mentioned about the power of data, and it's really what we are at the moment. Who has the data has the power. I can have data of all students, like in my university, but what are the code of ethics that I will do with that data? That's a kind of example that should be considered with these coders. So I propose an alternative strategy to raise awareness of ethics at the moment. If we refer to the software engineering, information technology, or computer science curricula globally, mostly there is one module on ethics. But what we need at the moment is we need to embed ethics in almost every course in the curriculum. For example, not only in software engineering, but also in security. When students learn about penetration testings, they need to know, they need to understand, they need to be able to analyze if they have ability to do the penetration against someone's security system. What are the consequences? What do they have to prepare for it? And this forum is for the internet governance, and policy and governance are also courses in computer science schools, and also in other schools like in law, I'm sure. And how do we embed ethics in these courses that, at least in Indonesia, haven't been conducted well? And now with the rise of AI from the long winter, Alan Turing invented AI like years ago during the World War II. But now the awakening of AI, we are not really sure how we need to teach our students. When we teach AI, we mostly discuss about the technical aspect of the AI. We hardly speak about the ethics of AI. That's what I'm doing at the moment during this semester break. I'm writing guidance how to embed ethics in these courses run by our faculty at University of Indonesia. Case studies, because if we check the SEM computing curricula, the ethics is explained to be students are supposed to be able to describe. So the learning outcome of the courses related to ethics, mostly the ability to describe, but actually what the students need is more than just describing, but also providing solution and consequences. So the learning outcomes in the curricula and the way we deliver our courses should be modified respectively. And this is something that's very interesting. Most computer science students, mostly they only meet computer science lecturers, which is not enough. So when we need to discuss about ethics, it's very important to have like guest lecturers from different faculties, from law, psychology, communication, and business. I think this is why this forum becomes very invaluable, very priceless, because in this forum, there are also people with various backgrounds. And if any of you could be part of the learning process at the computer science or software engineering courses or AI courses, then the students will learn more, not just from the computer science point of view. And it is very important also if we can create case studies involving students, like group projects involving students from computer science and different backgrounds. They need to analyze, for example, and provide solution of the something like WikiLeaks. But the discussion should involve students from different schools. Then it is really give big impact on these young people to understand what the ethics are, what the consequences, and even what are the questions that haven't been answered properly at the moment. So I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. It's back to you, Sita. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. It's very informative. So Betty proposed to have perhaps ethics in every course, also case study and multidisciplinary. This is also open for discussion later on, that if you would like to embed ethics in software engineering. Now I go to Yun Chong.
Hello. I'm a legal scholar from South Korea. I'm completing my book on AI governance, and then in this workshop session, I'd like to suggest several viewpoints. How can we analyze this complexity of the AI ethics problem? I'd like to go to the in front of the blackboard. The ultimate focus of our quest, which is elusive, is how can we design trustworthy AI, which is applicable to, which is influenced to everybody's life. And then AI has a superpower. We cannot get out of this. And then, from the perspective of law, there's two solutions to prevent the problem before problem happen, and then solving the problem after problem happen, before after problem. We can call it ex ante or ex post. Ex post is that if you hurt by machine, if you damaged by machine, you can sue them. You can ask some product liability and compensation. This is ex post. The ex ante is that the much more preemptive measure that, for example, some lawmakers or some policymakers ask lawmaker or AI designers so that AI system cannot hurt any part of the human life. Which one you prefer? Ex ante is much more preferred, okay? And then, in order to achieve ex ante measure, we need education for the software engineers. This is a basic condition of my argument. But the problem is that software engineers cannot code that much effectively. For example, you respect elder people, you protect female, you protect, you just try not to hurt the feeling of the people. You do not trim in front of the people's face. This is we know that social etiquette. We know how can we do in the very clumsy place to not disturb any person's feeling. But if you are software engineers, how can you code it? In case of the self-driving car, the coding a little bit easy because some kind of unexpected item is detected in front of the car. You just stop it. You can design it. But how about much more complicated things? My point is that there's a huge gap. There's a huge gray area between software engineers and social value of common sense. Between common sense and coding is not much comfortable. But lawmakers, policymakers ask them, oh, we need much more safe, much more trustworthy AI system. Can you do that? And then many IT companies like Google, or Facebook, or Apple, Microsoft, they promise, oh, you will make it. Don't worry, we just need self-regulation rather than strict rule of the law. This is exactly the status quo of right today. Okay, but here's the problem. First of all, it's a black box problem. When IT company employ several engineers, they code it together, but there's too much paragraph. And how many paragraphs you can imagine inside of the AI system? 10, 20,000? No, more than million. There's more than million parameters. You have a keyboard with sometimes less than 100 keyboard inside of the computer. You can manipulate everything. But in case of the AI system, which is a very high effective, it has more than million parameters. Which one you fix? You can fix something, and then outcome is different. And the problem is that I was discussed with software engineers, and he frankly confessed his helplessness about even he designed it, he don't know how it works. It's a very ridiculous situation we must admit today. Even designers cannot understand inside of the black box. And there's too much parameters. And then, in case of robot, there's too much hand. It's like a car. When you make some car, product of the car, how many people get involved in process of making? More than 1,000? Helen Nissenbaum called it the problem, too much hand problem. Too much hand problem is exactly applicable to the AI system also. Okay? And then we start from black box here. And another problem is that principal agent problem. Principal agent problem is an economic metaphor, and many economists like this. And we can call it prisoner's dilemma. And when principal, if you are the company owner, if you are some store owner, you can ask employee employees to work hard, get things done as soon as possible. But what if agent, for example, employee deceive you? Hey, master, I done this today, and can I go home? And principal or employer say, oh, you can go home if you don't. But the truth is that employee has nothing. Many things is spoiled. Many things is going wrong. But employer, the principal do not know about that. And then as much as agent deceive the principal cannot detect the problem, what's going on inside there. And then, consequently, the system is disrupted. System is wrong. System is gone. And then what if this scenario happen inside of the AI system making? IT company ask engineers, oh, we need something very much trustworthy AI system. Do not hurt any case of the customers' harm. And the employee said, yes, I will. But in fact, even employees do not understand what's going on inside of the black box. And then one of the employee has a very spiteful idea that if I make this system totally corrupt, and then I want use this AI system to kill some unknown people. And then, in this situation, employer or principal cannot control this. Do you believe the CEO of Microsoft can control every employee he has? No. Nobody knows. I have no better feeling to Microsoft. It's just an example for the record. Okay, I use my Microsoft window. Okay, and then this principal agent issue happened inside of the AI system, and to be precise, almost every AI developers already perceive this problem, but they hiding. They hide everything because they open it. Their stock price is going to plummet forever. It's kind of the AI ethics lacing today. You may have heard about them, some DeepMind Ethics Society, and then Microsoft partnership on AI, and then some Oxford Institute of the Humanities is about AI governance, AI algorithm governance, something like that. So many. Or OpenAI developers. So many.
I'm sorry, Yun Chang. Yeah, I think your time is up. If you want to finish it?
One line.
Okay.
And then, what if something happened inside? The problem happened. Government can go inside auditing. They hire some expert and then investigate what is going on inside of the algorithm. But it needs some authority or law. Without this, without any kind of the relevant provision or law, they can be protected by trade secret. But the whole algorithm is trade secret. Nobody can ask to open it without decision of court or authority. This is what's going to happen. But no country allow authority to get inside of trade secret because it is going to be undermining commercial value of AI. This is my presentation. And then eventually we are seeing the elusive quest toward trustworthy work, AI, and ethics. It is not easy to going to achieve. Have you ever heard about some explicable AI?
I think.
It's impossible right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Yun Chang. I guess it's very important to see. I think first of all, Koi was telling us about the broader pictures of the coders and ethics, while Betty talking specifically for educations, while Yun Chang also talking about the business of AI and the black box that could not be accountable in whatsoever ways. I guess that's my point taken. So I guess now, Kei, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Keisuke Kamimura. I am a last minute addition to this panel, so my name is not on the list of speakers on the APR-IGF website, but never mind. That's me. So I'll be very brief. I'm not taking only 3-4 minutes, hopefully. Well, what is ethics? In a simplest, is it too loud?
You need to get closer.
Okay.
It will be better.
So what is ethics? In a simplistic view, ethics is to understand what is right and what is wrong, and to do the right thing, not the other. So ethics is twofold thing. One is to understand, the other is to do, actually do. So, but the point is this: you can probably guess what is right and do the right thing in your everyday life. So do not steal somebody's wallet, or do not kill people, or do not commit suicide. But this simple logic is not as true as in technology, as you see. The problem of ethics in technology. You need to learn quite a lot before being able to understand what is right and do the right thing. So maybe I am answering one of the questions now. Education is quite important. Is it too close? Okay. I see.
Thank you. Is this better?
So higher learning is very much necessary, and the aspect of higher learning can be defined in two levels. One level is that you should learn social and ethical values by yourself, such as human rights, consumer protection, security, so on and so forth. Then, after learning these values, you will be able to think how social and ethical values are implemented in technology on your own. But, well, this is very much desirable, but this is very difficult because there are a whole lot of issues which you will have to learn before being able to, start developing technology. In some cases, you may not be able to start forever, so you will stay as a student forever. That's not what we would like to happen. So you have to look at the other aspect of learning. You can observe the socially accumulated wisdom about technology and social values. Actually, we have a range of pieces of technology that already represent social values and ethics. So without having too deep understanding of what you should do, but you can turn to what someone else has already considered and developed. I will take gender choice, for example. Hello? Okay. Oh, this is better. So gender choice. I guess all of us, in making application documents, all of us might force to tick one of the boxes indicating your human sex, male, female, or others. But as an engineer, you might wonder how you represent these human sexes in application format. and some of you may end up having only 2 options. Some others may want to have as many options as you can think of. So you may end up 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 choices. But there is a international standard called ISO IEC 5218. 5218. This is international standard for codes for the representation of human sexes. This standard has 4 choices. One is not known, the second one is male, the third one is female, and the last one is not applicable. From a perspective of gender science, the 4 choices may not be enough to represent or cover the sexual orientation and affiliation, affinity of all humankind. But from an engineering point of view, 2 options plus 2, male, female, not known and not applicable, may be reasonable set of options. So without knowing or without learning too much about gender, there is already a technology that you can take to, you can look to when you try to make gender-aware application document format. So this is one example. This is one example of the accumulated wisdom that I mentioned earlier. So, when I was invited to this panel, it occurred to me that one of my, I don't call him a friend, but David Farber, Professor Farber, once mentioned that security should be designed into technology at a very early stage of development. You may want to start thinking about security after you finish prototyping and after you have completed some sort of development. But he says this is not quite right. He says you can't do this after you start developing things. So you have to think ethical values in the very early stage, at the very early stage of development. So you don't have to think, you don't have to decide what is right, what is wrong by yourself, but you can listen to the accumulated wisdom on what is right and what is wrong. So education is quite important. Of course, education does not solve all, but there is very important aspect of education in technology or engineering education. Thank you.
I would like to ask for you first. In Japan, is there any ethics embedded in curriculum?
I don't think not much. Okay. Not enough ethics education in place in engineering education.
Okay. So yeah. So okay. So but I think from the floor first. Is there any questions or comments? 1 comment from you, 2 comments, 3 comments, and perhaps you later.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. Please. Introduce yourself and.
Sure. Hi, my name is Samrid and I'm from India. So I had 2 questions and 1 small comment. Right. So the first one is regarding the ethics framework. Right. There are 2 ways to go about it. Either we kind of have some sort of we force it in some ways that a developer has to do something, right? Or we go ahead on the basis of a code of honor. So, for example, in the first part, what we do in the technical community is that we have libraries, right? We have preset libraries. So the first lesson, in fact, in cybersecurity is that you do not code up your own security algorithm. Even if you know how to, it's best to use a library which the entire world uses, because that has been tested for everything, right? So you're more secure that way. if you go ahead with a code of honor in medical, like we have a Hippocratic oath, right? So do we have some sort of a thing, a similar thing, where we can make sure that there are ethics involved when we are using emerging technologies, right? And if not that, do we have, since there are quite a few academicians on the panel, do we have some sort of a standardized code which people can use, which ensures that ethical frameworks are being taken into consideration when we put any piece of code on production, right? The second question that I had was about, do you think having one ethics course in the curriculum suffices, or do we need a full-fledged education where ethics is incorporated by design into the curriculum? So as an example, so I come from a liberal arts background where I studied computer science as well as political science, and as a result, I think I can better appreciate the need for ethics while coding, as compared to somebody who would just have one particular course. As an example, in one of the previous sessions, a colleague, she was talking about, she was arguing for internet shutdowns, and I felt that I had the same view a few months ago, but I felt that because of my educational background, I could better appreciate the value behind arguing against internet shutdowns than somebody else who did not have that in their education. So in which point of the education do you think we should have a combination of some ethics courses, and how much is sufficient, right? And the third is a comment, is that, so I currently am working on a new university, and we are setting that up in India. It's called Plaksha University, and we are launching a course this August which takes into consideration technology and leadership. So I would be happy to discuss any aspect of ethics or anything where we can incorporate that in the curriculum itself. So if any of you are interested in having that conversation, I would be very happy to have that feedback. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Because this is a roundtable discussion, so everybody is actually can also answer some questions and vice versa. But also the panel can have a feedback. To you, sir.
My name is Yoshi Obata, and I'm from Japan. I think we need to, broaden the issue to not only computing, because these ethics related to engineering, my observation, it will be divided into three parts. One is the product designing, which is still part of the engineering, and second one is the coding or programming to achieve the product design, and third one is the operation handling content, because ethics is content, it's not about logic. So I don't think in any case you can define an ethical program, because program just does logics, and there's no there's no ethics. You cannot say that this logic is ethical or unethical, but you can say that this content is ethical or unethical, which means that basically when you want to talk about ethics in engineering, you need to talk about, actually in reality, you need to talk about operation, how you operate it. And then it's very difficult to see, because the content is normally provided by users or computers or whatever. There's nearly no case that you can detect it, because these data also has some background, So you don't see a line saying that, you don't detect a data and say that, oh, this is unethical. You need to see where it is coming from, what the data behind, before it is saying, or even the data after it is saying. You need to see the whole content and analyze it, and it's very difficult to prevent it or filter it in real time. So it's not only about the operation of the product, which does the program, the product program, which achieves what the product designer wants to do. There's another operation which will review the content. So I'm saying that there's a product, and then it will be coded, and then we operate it, but then you need another program which will kind of analyze the content, and then you need an operation to run that program. So where this engineering and then ethics comes in is that it's not the first half of the program, it's the second half of the program. How you want to design a program which can detect, or how do you say, analyze content and find out this is ethical or unethical. I mean, basically filter it firstly in the beginning, and then at the end of the game, you need people to make decisions. And there's no way you can pull in AI into this picture because there will be not enough data like deep learning, or there's no logic in ethics. You know, if there's a logic in ethics, it will be very easy to program that logic and then analyze the data. But unfortunately, I don't think there's any logic in ethics or unethical. So it means that you can still maybe try to deep learn, but to coach the deep learner, I think it will be as big as an effort to really to analyze it at the same time. Yeah. Thank you.
What? Gayatri? You want?
No.
Yeah.
I get quiet. You first.
Thank you. This is Gaia. Firstly, thank you so much. This is such an interesting conversation. And I wanted to just perhaps point out that there's this book called Algorithms of Oppression. Perhaps if you're more interested to read about how algorithms can actually be instruments of oppression and can show the bias of individuals, I think that's a great book to read. It's about 500 pages of completely depressing material that one should definitely read. I think one of the core points, and thank you so much for raising the gender aspect, because it's always the gender and race and religion and caste that you can clearly see the bias on when you look at some of the AIs. So I guess the comment and question I have is, do we have the recognition that codes are not neutral? I think that's sort of the fundamental place from which we have to start, right? Because codes are being written by humans, and which means that it carries with it the biases, values, ethics, thinking, the person that's writing it. Even if it's 20 different people writing a code, if the 20 different people are racist and sexist, then that code is going to be racist and sexist. And that's the case with Facebook. It's the case with how Facebook's algorithms work in terms of content moderation. Because when we see Facebook will be, after much political pressure and international outcry, they were able to weed out some of the anti-Rohingya hate sentiments from Bangladesh. But then the racism is so embedded that they did not run the same algorithms for rest of the countries in the world. So now you see anti-Rohingya, deeply racist comments still exist in Facebook in India. So I think the recognition that racism and sexism, bleeds into codes, I think is important. What I'm still trying to uncover from this discussion is what do the panelists mean by ethics? And I think the definition of what is right and wrong is helpful. But what do you mean by what is right itself is sort of, that's a very subjective thing, no? Being righteous is such a subjective thing. So I'm wondering is ethics the right framing for it? Perhaps it is, but is ethics the best framing for the kind of codes we want and not, is one question. But I also was wondering if we've paid any attention to the rights-based approach to coding, which is to say that not just coding, but a rights-based approach to ICT policy making, which is missing right now, because we're right now making policies based on needs, based on power, based on situations, right? If there's a hate speech situation, we're making hate speech laws. If there's a security breach, we're making security laws. But is it really based on, is it coming from a rights-based thinking where we understand rights and then we understand the social realities of people? Because understanding social realities of people also then will give us the understanding of what is needed and what is to be avoided, right? So I just wanted to hear more about what you think about that.
Okay, I think, how many of you here is engineer? Raise your hand. How many of you actually doing the software development from the beginning to end? How many of you did that? Yeah, okay. I was a start as an engineer, and then move into the management and also go to the policy. I think in here it's really nice place, so we put the different backgrounds sit together. Let me tell you how the software industry doing. I think you have thought about the programming is can do whatever they want, and then they just write it and they can hide it for the manager and they publish it into the cyberspace and running. Actually, not that simple. Come on. Any software programmer, when they roll a code, if that company have resources, also is a big company. First of all, as I worked for before, first of all, they will check your code, violate any copyright or patent. You have to be legal. You have to be legal. And legal can be easily to check by flow chart. You have to explain clear, and you cannot copy the other's code. Okay. And first of all is the copyright. The next one is because right now have a data protection law, have a GDPR. The company will begin to watch out what kind of code you are writing is violate the GDPR or some kind of data protection law. So it's not that thing you are thinking about a programmer can do whatever they want. Okay. And here is an interesting question because we are touching in the AI and the ethic. Here we have to be careful. Remember that in the year early of the 2000, European already talking about design in privacy. That means they wish the programmer before you design, you should thinking about did you violate the privacy, okay? And that is started, and because of privacy or data protection, that at least they have a very clear picture or regulation there. So you can be trained how you cannot go into violate the law. Okay. Now we come into the ASIC. You know how old ASIC mean? 3,000 years. ASIC have a 3,000 year history. Do we have a single solution or definition for ASIC? We don't. To be honest, we don't. We're still talking about, for example, the most famous lecture is given by Harvard University called Justice, right? And it's still in debating, okay? And now the third one I'd like to point out you one more thing very important. ASIC evolving. You thinking about the ASIC, we're thinking about 3,000 years ago, the ASIC we're talking about, and now the ASIC we're talking about, the detail or the thinking, the concept is different, it's changing. And that's how the ASIC can be changing because of innovation. The innovation always try to challenge the traditional concept. Thinking about it. You think about the Skype come out. Skype challenge all the telco. If not a Skype, the telco still monopoly. And because of Skype tell you you can do the communication online. So the telco never can do as bad as a early day, right? So I think you have to be careful that is, first of all, engineer is a human also. Engineer is a people. For me, as an engineer, I also graduate from the college. I go to the graduate school, I still binding by regulation, by law. So engineer is a human, we also have an ASIC. Maybe different to you, but I definitely have my ASIC, right? And so let's mean, don't think about the programmer. They have no ASIC, they need to be trained. Come on. From the day one they go to a school, they are training what is the ASIC is. You remember your elementary school, the teacher will punish you by beating. It's because you violate the ASIC or the rule of the classroom, right? So we was teaching from the very first day to the education until we are be a programmer and then be a manager. So we do have ethics training in the very beginning. We are not ignorant peoples. We are not idiot. Okay? You can argue, say, our ethics is different to you. I agree. Yes, we do have a different ethic concept. And the most important is ethic is keep changing. Don't forget that ethic is not a steel. The 2,000 years ethic is very different to today. If that is 50 years ago, Skype cannot exist because the government and telco do not allow you to exist. So remember that ASIC, first of all, ASIC is keep changing. Second of all, innovation is important because innovation going to challenge. The ASIC, our ASIC, the social norm is reasonable at the current age. If we don't have innovation, then we continue to say, oh, here is a box. You only can do something in the box. You are limited innovation. You are limited the world developments. I think I'm not against more discussion or training or learning or putting even more regulation like a GDP or whatever, but I just like to, I think basically, I really appreciate here we have a many different background, the engineer and the different people sit together and try to understand, to do dialogue. Don't say the engineer don't know ethics.
I don't think we would not say that about the engineer doesn't know ethics. We would like to know, because now the main issues of this discussion is because there are so many decisions being made by machine and how we should do about it. I guess this also answer some questions or comments on perhaps there is no one ethics framework, and perhaps ethic is also not a good terms to be used. We don't know. I mean, because it keeps changing. It depends on the current situation. It's right or wrong, but we don't have the comment first. But I'm sorry, sir, but I have to ask Betty first in Jakarta. She would like to say something. Betty, are you in?
Yes. Thank you very much, Sita and everybody. Yes, I have learned a lot from your comments here. And Kuo is right that we have learned ethics ever since we were kids at home, even before we went to school. Things that I think we need to improve for software engineers is to, when we work on programs dealing more on people, then social engineers need to understand more on ethics. For example, at the moment, my team is working on developing machine learning to detect someone, or especially students, whether they have a mental health issue or no. If we can do the early detections that certain students have mental health issue, we could encourage their lecturers to give more supports, or we could refer the students to psychologists. At the moment, our machine learning is still have like 75% accuracy. We were working to make it more accurate, but to make this into context, what I learned is within my teams, when I work with young people that haven't gone to medical school or school of psychology, where ethics have been like emphasized more than in school of computing or information and of technology, then I need extra like materials to train my students. And now we are going to make machine learning dealing with people and data. Someone said about data, yeah, ethical data, how we can get data about someone's mental health. And once we like predict someone has mental issue, what shall we do? It's something that is not to be just disclosed openly. So these things that I think software engineering students, needs to learn from other schools like medical or psychology, where they have more experience and more emphasis on ethics. That's what I want to comment, Sita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betty. Before, I think Yunchen would like to, and then you, sir, and then Kay.
Yeah, I have comment on the question. Japanese, what is your name? Nakamura?
Yoshi.
Yoshi. Oh, okay, Yoshi. Okay. Okay, Yoshi. Yoshi-san suggests me some kind of the product design and the algorithm R&D and content should be separable. I agree about that. And then I can apply some kind of the layer metaphor in the internet designing. There's a physical layer and the logical layer and content layer. And then algorithm design itself is kind of allocatable, maybe categorized as a logical layer. And then, more broadly speaking, AI ethics is not a matter of only the coding. There's also an operator and then manufacturers. And then in South Korea, already developed 3 pages of the global ethics principles, but it's not officially announced yet. It's going to do. And then first of all, there's a software AI R&D, who is software engineers. And then next process is the manufacturing. Manufacturing is too much hands problem, as like Helen Nesselbaum said, is hardware making. And the third one is that at this point, technology is very much neutral, we can assume, and then operator use it, he can use harmfully or beneficially. And then users can be interpreted as operator. And then again, the AI R&D and manufacturing and then operator has 3 different paths, and then every 3 part of person has responsibility to use AI responsibly and not harmful way. And then robot, for example, robot making process is applicable 3 phases of whole, but Facebook AI for their detecting fake news problem can be applicable only to software phases, I believe. And then when it comes to education, I'd like to stress a much more broader way. In education for the software engineers is only happening in MIT in the world. I never heard about the other college or university. MIT already started their own AI college, and then they already started with Harvard Law School, Jonathan J. Train, and Joy Ito. They started some governing AI and ethics class. They started last year already. And then we maybe consider the kind of curriculum in the every level of the college education level. And then, but could you remember some plenary sessions? Somebody asked us, nobody left behind of the in process of their technology development. I totally agree with that. And then I once discussed with Vince Soff in South Korea. He said that TCP knowledge of TCP/IP is very important to people get involved in the multi-stakeholder model and many years ago. But today we need much more knowledge about AI literacy and then and knowledge about some kind of data science. Without this, people cannot get involved in what's going on and then what's the problem. That means I suggest that today's knowledge about the algorithm, machine learning, data science is highly, highly momentous, so that people get involved on AI ethics discussion in terms of the multi-stakeholder, establishing multi-stakeholderism model. And amongst 5 multi-stakeholders, academia, government, tech community, civil society, and big IT company, who is the powerful part? Today, I assume, big company, big IT company has everything. I only told you some black box metaphor, and then the the other part of the multi-stakeholder, for example, government or independent community or civil society, they all, yeah, but very powerful, but they don't know inside of the what's going on inside of black box. That's my point. And then civil society also not much knowledgeable about that. And then I suggest Betty and then many other speakers in this room, and we also suggest some kind of the coursework or public presentation, public knowledge contents about AI ethics. How can we design it reasonably? Thank you.
Thank you, Yunjan. Sir?
Yes, John Brewer, just representing myself, I would like to back up the point of our first questioner here, that we should be thinking about rights-based computing in addition to ethics-based computing, because as Kuwei said, 3,000 years ethics, it's changing all of the time. And in the various countries represented in this room, we all have a number of different sets of ethics that diverge quite greatly. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, though, is 70-some years old now, and we all should be subscribing to this. And yet many of the systems that we design today and use violate our basic human rights. Rights to privacy, rights not to be slandered. The systems that we're designing and using do not support these rights. So I like very much what you said, and I hope that we're talking about this more in this conference.
Thank you very much. I think that's also a good point, whether we should rethink about the ethics itself and see what the most compatible framework for all the countries to be more comply, if I'm not mistaken. I think
I have a short comment on the question of university IT education. So one course is obviously not sufficient. So I would suggest combined degrees or minors in ethics or philosophy. That kind of combined education might be a way to go, because majoring information technology is quite packed, right? So putting one or two ethical courses may not be even difficult. So a combined degree may be one way to go. And we also discussed is whether technology is neutral. I might not agree, because technology can be biased. When we talk about this issue in Japan, we always talk about the meltdown accident of the nuclear power plants in 2011. Nuclear power is not a neutral technology. It has too much effect on the environment and everything else. So after the accident, we began to talk about technology management or technology policy to decide whether we should have this technology and what not. So we have to look at technology from that kind of perspective, I guess. Thank you.
I guess I give the floor to the people who hasn't speak first, Amit, if that's okay. Yeah. Just.
Nothing. I just wanted to say something in a very short manner. Because, well, logically, we want ethics because everything, the world, even though it seems a lot smaller, it's getting a lot larger. But again, we already are in a decently sustained framework, and ethics is just another framework. Because with ethics, we start to consider some things proper and improper, which means that sometimes our own ethics stop us from doing some things that are necessary in very extreme conditions.
Understand. Who would like to speak? Okay, Rila?
for me, as I would like to speak to just by myself as programmer. So actually, that's good if the educations give them but actually the academy like university or schools is recognized by this Ministry of Education. So I hope that they can broader like ethics education. I mean like algorithm ethics, because I believe that maybe some of the university that held a major in information technology teach about the ACM code of ethics and etc. But not some of them. I believe that. So that's why we have to maybe my comments just we ask the government to yes that's like a regulations to give that curriculum, because if it's international ethics like ACM code of ethics like the Mrs. Beatty said before, so it should be, because somehow the programmer, future developer or engineer after graduations they have to maintain of algorithm ethics or engineer ethics to behind a computer machines. And maybe because some of them read documentations, but some of them not. So that's why. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rila. I think Kuwei or others would like to speak. Yeah.
I'm Fu Yuan. I'm come from Taiwan, and I want to share some program of ASIC. In 2010 years, Google dropped off China market, and 3 and 4 years after 3 and 4 years, Google launched a project called Dragonfly. It is a search engine for China. They can limit people can see and people cannot see. But the programmer in the Google, they protect this this project. I think it's a good exotic effort to show the programmer is a good had a good ethic in it. Okay, that's all.
Okay, let me try to make it short. My computing and training actually from supercomputing. Supercomputing actually developing a lot of weapons. That is 1990. In my company, many of the people refuse to participate anything related to weapon. So let me say something like that. Programmer have an ethic. Programmer is not do whatever the company want to do. Of course, maybe it's because in the United States it's much free. The programmer can do anything, but maybe in other countries you don't have that choice. Okay, I want to coming back to when we are talking about the ASIC training or courses. Be careful that ASIC is building by community. You should not by teach. If you want to develop in the ASIC courses, please making a dialogue among your classmates, including the teacher. Nobody can dominate, including the teacher and the student should dialogue, because the social norm, the ASIC, is not by single person to dominate it. Should be developing by community. The same thing as we are talking about here. We should not say, oh, here I'm teaching you ASIC. No, we should go to generate the ASIC among us. You know, because we don't know whose ASIC is right, whose ASIC is wrong. Unless we have a consensus about the ASIC. And that is a part of reason why we try to do the multi-stakeholder mechanism. But I definitely know that the government not really care in Asia. Sorry about that.
Can I answer first? Okay. Yeah, very short answering. You mentioned about the ACM ethics principle, but it's just a suggestion. The government today, any government won't regulate AI, since today is an AI race in the world. Every country wanted to allow their own companies to cutting edge, to much more advanced position in the AI race. And then secondly, I agree with Mr. Ku Wei-yu. Difference of AI standard in the world. MIT already published a paper in Science, Nature. In the trolley dilemma case, somebody should save someone in the inevitable choice, and then who should be die is totally different from based on age, culture, race, gender is totally different, and then we cannot say what is the world standard ethics. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Samrit from India. So a quick response to the current conversation. So a violation of an ethical framework is not always intentional. It can also happen by accident. As an example, this is something which was developed in some US university where they were using machine learning to dispense soap. Right. So what just happened was that and they put it across the university. But what happened was when a white person goes and puts their hand under the soap dispenser, then the soap comes out. But if a brown or a black person goes, then that doesn't work. Right. And the reason was that the data with which they trained the soap dispenser, they never took in any samples from a black or a brown person, right? Now, this is a silly example, but if they use a similar technology for more crucial operations, this could be a very this could be a very big reason for somebody not being not being able to enter a country, for example, right? Especially for the minorities. So they perhaps never thought that this could be a discriminating factor, but this can be considered a part of the ethics. So my point here is that when we say that the current engineering curriculum is not sufficiently focused on ethics, it's not an attack on the engineers. It's more to say that there are some blind spots that we still need to address, right? The second question, and I don't know if you have the time to address it, is I want to go back to the point he made where a lot of the algorithms today are black boxes. Right? So people don't know, even the programmers don't know what would be the result that your machine learning algorithm would produce, right? So in a legal framework, and I believe most of the countries, their legal framework is based on intent, right? So only if you intend to harm somebody should you be prosecuted, right? So in such a legal framework, how does a machine learning algorithm fit in, where as a programmer you do not know whether this can harm somebody? So if I make an algorithm and I don't know what it's going to do in some cases and it might hurt somebody, let's say in a self-driving car, should I be prosecuted? Should I be held liable for it?
I guess, thank you very much. I guess I have to close this, but before I close it, I guess thank you very much for your participations. In Internet Governance Forum at the global level, we have these intersessional sessions, like Best Practice Forum, Dynamic Coalitions. I guess if APR IGF has some more energy on it, I guess this is also the things that we need to discover more. Because there are so many layers that I just discovered now, actually, based on our discussions regarding the frameworks, whether ethics or rights-based approach, how to put it in educations, whether it's multidisciplinary or higher education or lifelong education, or like what Kowe was mentioning, whether we need it in an education, whether we should put it in the social norm rather than in education itself. So I guess those are the questions that we need to ask further. I would like to thank you for participating in this conversation, and also the panelists. I think we can applaud ourselves on it. Thank you very much.
May I have your attention, please? This is an announcement from APRGF Secretariat. So the synthesis document town hall session is going to start soon. So please proceed to the plenary hall for the session. Thank you.
Hi, I finally met. How can I call you?
Just want to introduce.
Could you write your name in Chinese character?
Hi, thank you very much, Yun
Oh,
Chang.
oh, yeah, yeah.
I think we have to start more conversation.
Yeah, your moderation is perfect.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And we'd like to share the outcome of
Yeah. Betty. Yeah. Yeah, I can share it with you. I can also email it to you. Also, I will like it. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. My name is it's beautiful name. John. Zip is like. Oh yeah. I don't want yours. There's so many positions like that. Oh, yeah. She told me. And then you've already found some relevance.
Yeah, this is the most relevant because I know that what kind of questions.
I have a good news for you. I found my files when I taught in Korea about AI processing development. I can present to you as like this. We're supposed to be here. The day after. And then I give them PowerPoint and you can display a little bit. Not much. We only focus on the US activity, how can they use open data in terms of machine learning. Okay. They will like it.
Inclusion.
Yeah, it's exactly inclusion. And then when are you supposed to be together about to discuss this? Tomorrow?
Or maybe after my cybersecurity.
You decide.
I know that what should be
Because
session should be more, I think behind computing is that from computing theory,
you just tell me exact time and venue, and I will be sure because I make you wait it, and then it's not no more. Okay, and then
tomorrow
yeah, and then she and me and many speakers had a full minute to discuss this. If we do like this, and I show you my PowerPoint, we can make a very nice discussion.
you have tomorrow any session?
We will have a lunch together. It's okay.
Can we take lunch tomorrow together and discuss? Okay.
Tomorrow I will be in workshop too, so maybe we can talk in the lunch because I was in this one.